You're good to go?
I am.
All right. Excellent. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talk to Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle C. Baker. And before I introduce today's guest, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. And today I have an amazing guest. So those who listen to me regularly know all my guests are amazing, but this one in particular really I'm so happy to have her on because she talks about a subject that is very, very important. And it's all about food inclusivity. So for those of you who have dietary restrictions, allergies, if you're vegan, vegetarian, you know exactly what we're talking about. So I am introducing our guest today, the lovely Heather Landex. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now we know each other from our publisher where we started our books, and I just love your book and the work that you've been doing around it. But before we start talking about what you do, can you tell us a little bit about tell us your story and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I think like most graduates, I graduated with a biology degree, not knowing what on earth I was going to do. I disappeared immediately, even before graduating, the ceremony and everything. I disappeared to Australia. I'm British, so it was pretty much the opposite side of the world. I had a friend there, so I was supposed to go there just for a few months, but I had ideals of being a conservationist, tracking animals and being out in the outback and all of these things. And I did do that for a while. I did it as a volunteer, and then I helped some PhD students, and I did some quite cool jobs like possum tracking and tagging stingrays and that kind of thing. But actually, conservation is pretty gruesome. And I found a lot of like some of the animals die in the traps, or a lot of conservation work is killing stuff, like pest control and invasive, especially in Australia, there's a lot of invasive species and they poison things. And if I trap a cat, for example, I'm a complete cat lover. I just can't do the thing I'm supposed to do, which is kill it, basically, euthanize it. I basically give that job to someone else because couldn't handle it. So I eventually retrained in New Zealand. I went and tried to become I was a dive master for a short while. But it's not one of those careers that you could probably sustain very long. There's a lot of lift. It's quite a laborious job, and you have to have like that energy and dive in the same sites and things like that. It soon wore thin. So I returned back to Britain and retrained in the protection of humans, because you don't tend to control disease and things in humans by killing them or hurting them, there's some ethics involved there. So I retrained in the conservation of humans, which is environmental health. And then I had a sort of affinity with the biology background for bacteria and gross stuff, study of, diseases. So I became a food inspector, but quickly moved to the private sector because, again, I'm a little bit too soft and empathetic of people, because a lot of that kind of work is basically the food police, and you have to like close places down and scare people, and you have to be quite authoritarian, whereas I'm more the friendly, like, I'd like to coach you rather than threaten you with prosecution. And I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of food businesses are actually criminal because the standards are that low. And that was a bit of a surprise. In the realities of the job were a bit gruesome as well, and not very nice on a daily basis. And then I worked at the Olympics, which is a bit of a highlight of my career. That's where I learned I like working with people that are maybe new to working in hospitality or new to working in food and training. So there's a lot of people with part of the Olympics was to improve the local area, and a lot of people got jobs for the first time, and a lot of young people or long-term unemployed were working there, and that was a really rewarding job. And then I went around inspecting hotels for safety, so general safety like fire safety, child safety, swimming pool safety, but also food safety. And I did that in a lot of countries. I met my husband, and now I live in Copenhagen with my Danish family. I'm now back in the EU as a Danish citizen, which was rather exciting. And then obviously the pandemic hit and I couldn't travel. I actually got locked down in Iceland. I wasn't allowed to leave. I couldn't get a flight out again. My family was supposed to join me because I was working there, and then they were going to join me. So my family never arrived. That was quite terrifying.
Wow.
And the pandemic sort of induced, like, I met you and I was writing a book about food inclusivity, because it's not one of the food safety standards. You don't have to be able to serve people with dietary preferences. You don't have to even be that pleasant to them. Which in other legislation, it's quite discriminatory, or not quite discriminatory. It's very discriminatory and offensive and often unsafe and harsh.
Yeah.
To be a person with dietary preferences is quite difficult. And I am that difficult person. So I'm best placed to be this advisor to food businesses as well, because I have the skill of being friendly in quite confrontational situations quite often.
Which is good, because there's a lot of people, and you really touched on the subject there, is that the food industry can be rude to you if you are, even if you just don't want the sauce with the food. So imagine when there's some other restrictions and you're only asking to make sure that you don't get sick or die, and they make you feel like you're the worst person on the planet
or you're fussy, not understanding it's life-threatening. They think you're exaggerating, hypochondriac, a complainer. All of these
exactly. You're just being difficult, and then you don't want to, as a person, because I've lived it myself. We mentioned before we started recording, my son had severe allergies that were deadly, and we just stopped going to restaurants because again, it was just like, oh, they're just being difficult. But no, I mean, even just for my son, it was shellfish. And even if they were just steaming shrimp, just the vapors, if he would smell it, he would go into anaphylactic shock. So that's not an experience you want to have in somebody's restaurant. And it's also not something you want your other customers to see. If somebody does get sick on location, that's traumatizing. So yeah, you really touched on something. That's why I wanted to dive a little
shellfish bit. Is a famous one as well, but a lot of people, for example, pregnant ladies are asked to avoid shellfish, especially oysters and things like that, and that's a food safety precaution because they're more likely to have a miscarriage or something if they got food poisoning, right. Or it could even kill the mother. But obviously, if you're eating raw oysters, there is no food safety protection there. It's just taken out the sea and fed to you. So they do have testing, and then they can recall, bad batches and things. But actually, I was working because I've worked in a lot of hospitality venues as staff, probably more than 50 in my time before I became environmental health. And there was a lady there, and she was vomiting on the premises, and she was accusing the premises of food poisoning. And actually, it was just an indication she was pregnant. So she was vomiting in reaction to shellfish, not because there was anything wrong with the shellfish, but just because her body couldn't handle it while she was pregnant. So pregnancy is one of these very strict, temporary dietary preferences. I had a lot of issues when I was pregnant, but it was more like cravings for weird things.
Yeah, it was the same with me.
I couldn't find decaf coffee. I was trying to be caffeine free, and I couldn't find that here. So that was everywhere I went where there was coffee or alcoholic drinks, I'm like, you've forgotten to include the pregnant people.
Oh yes, I never thought of that, but yeah, decaf is another issue. You get judged harshly on that too. I'm a big
well, there's a lot of sober shaming as well, or if you are vegan or you're avoiding something for health, like some people avoid gluten just for health, not because they're celiac or something like that, and they get shamed for it. Like, oh, you're on a fad diet, and you're like, well, they're entitled to eat whatever or not eat whatever they want.
Yeah,
especially people who may be avoiding alcohol or avoiding alcohol or animal products for a religion. They get treated differently. So there's this whole level of equality going on.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's still allowed. It's not allowed in every other industry, but the food industry is still very free to do whatever they want with it. And so that actually kind of leads me to the question I wanted to ask you. Is there a defining moment where you knew it was time for you to become, I would say, an advocate, to speak up and speak out for about food inclusivity?
I think the scariest moment in my life so far, I was staying in a hotel. It's actually what I write in why I wrote my book. I'd just become vegan, and so I was obviously suddenly looking at labels a lot more closely. Even though I'm already working in food safety, going around places, you have to look at labels and use by dates and health and safety standards and all these things. But it never occurred to me about contamination. So although I was already vegan, I didn't really worry about contamination with milk and egg. It's very common, by the way. It's like a good proportion of vegan food is contaminated the way it's produced or the way it's cooked to be served to you. It's going to have traces of milk and egg, especially shellfish, especially when there's colorings and things that are made from shellfish or cross reactivity, which is what I also have a shellfish allergy, but it's cross reactivity because I'm really allergic to insects, and it's the similar protein, so my body reacts to shellfish. Luckily, not in an anaphylactic way. But I ended up in an ambulance, not able to breathe. It turned out later that it's probably hyperventilation of the whole and asthma, which I didn't know until recently. But at the time, I thought I had a severe milk allergy because I had a full body rash. I woke up, my eyes were swollen. It started swelling up even more, and I had this like irritability. And this is what probably I felt like I had an allergy, it felt like itching on the inside. My skin was falling off type of thing. And I went to the reception in this hotel because I was traveling around inspecting restaurants. Like, this is what I was doing for a living. And I was like, I think I'm having an allergic reaction. I rang this emergency number and they said, we're going to call you an ambulance. And I said, oh, sort of reacting. So this receptionist gave me just a standard antihistamine. And I already all my life have had like hay fever symptoms, but pretty bad sometimes, but only on a bad year for pollen. And she said, oh, just go sit over there. And I was working on my laptop and I suddenly felt really weird. And they say a symptom of anaphylaxis, which I already know from training people in allergy awareness. I know there's this feeling of pending doom, like you just know something bad's happening. So I went to this receptionist and I said, I think I need an ambulance. But I didn't get the words out because I was already like collapsing, basically. And she laid me down behind reception. And it was quite funny because my husband had booked the hotel, so they had the wrong name for me. So I was trying to tell whilst hyperventilating basically, and I was swelling up, and my hands and my feet were bone white. So I was like, I thought I was going into shock, but it's a symptom of hyperventilating. So the irritation was making me have slight asthma and overventilating. So I was lying on the floor thinking I was dying, trying to tell them my name. So, and then I was in an ambulance, and once the ambulance was there, they like calmed me down, and then the symptoms started to go away. But I still had this full body rash, and I couldn't feel my face and things like that. It was really scary. And in the hospital, they were like, "Yes, you've definitely had an allergy. Have you thought it could be milk?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm vegan." And they're like, "Oh yeah, it's very common." For people who think like avoid milk for whatever reason, religion or veganism or just for health, because it's quite often a restriction for health reasons. That's really common that there's milk and egg in vegan food. And I'm like, I did know that. I'm a food safety inspector. I did know that. I did know that. So then for about 4 months until I got to see there's a big long waiting list for allergists. That's actually quite quick. I thought I had a severe milk allergy. And just avoiding milk is not easy, especially if you're vegan and you're already avoiding a lot of things. And then it turned out it wasn't milk, but I do have a severe milk intolerance, not just lactose intolerance, which is everyday servers and waiters and things confuse lactose free with milk free. And then they confuse again if it's vegan, and they confuse again if it's non-dairy, which just means it's not made with milk. Doesn't mean it's free from milk. Right. And all these terms are so confusing for people, even people like me who were diagnosed late on with an allergy. It's just so stressful to go shopping, to go on holiday, to stay anywhere that's not at home. And I can imagine for children, it's very isolating and the cause of bullying and all of these other things. And then the food industry just sort of, we have a disclaimer. So this is my major focus, is these disclaimers. Like you can't just tell them that everything is in everything. That is not acceptable, because it's excluding some people from food choice and freedom from worrying and anxiety. And like you said, you can't trust anyone.
Well, and it's not that they're doing it maliciously. It's just that they don't know. A lot of them don't know, like you said. And I've had that issue as well with my mom, who has been vegan for 25 years, 30 years. And, there's servers are still saying, well, no, it is vegan, but there's cheese in it, or there's mayo in it. And it's like, no, it's not. They honestly believe that it is vegan. They honestly believe that it's shellfish free, and even in schools, because in Canada, there's this law where there's no nuts, no peanuts, no tree nuts. And that's the law. Everybody's gotten used to that. But everything else is allowed. So when I found out that my son had shellfish, I warned them and say, listen, some kids would bring shrimp for lunch. It's not common, but some will. And at the time, we didn't know if fish was also included in his allergies. But the schools would just kind of like almost a disclaimer, say, well, the law only says nuts, so we wash our hands of everything else. But you're sending your child off to school and you don't know if they'll come back because nobody wants to take responsibility for it. And so it's kind of scary a little bit.
It is like this default that the person with the allergies is responsible for knowing everything about the food business and how food is prepared, and the whole food supply chain and what might or might not be in food. And how do you know that there could be shellfish in a dessert?
That's right.
That's right. You wouldn't expect. Yeah. Or colorings from crab.
Exactly. The colorings, those are bad. Or even just the whole omega-3 fad that came through, where we had to have omega-3 and everything. And now we had fish oil in milk and fish oil in bread and fish oil, because that's apparently, for some people, that was the only way you could get omega-3. And so, looking at labels, you don't always see that there's fish in your yogurt. And for somebody who has a fish...
there's the other side of the coin, where there's more people with allergies now and they can't figure out why. It might even be air pollution, or things in our diet already, or too much.
That's right.
It could be anything. I personally think it's a lot to do with stress, because when I had my significant moment where I didn't know all of these facts, I just never thought about implementing it before for myself. I didn't realize the struggles of the average person with allergies, and I was happy with these disclaimers before that point. It's not until you live it that you realize.
Exactly.
But there's so many, like, the growth of people with allergies. People have been born with allergies now, and that's like never heard of before, and they can't explain it. And these are not just they're sensitive, like a lot of people condemn people to being sensitive, and that can mean lots of insulting things at the same time. But it's like, if I get a sniff of this, I'm going to die within 20 minutes. It is pretty unbelievable, and that's why people think it's a joke. Like, people who would like a casual student working in a bar is like, I'm just going to put nuts on the counter, and you're like, that nut could kill me, and they're like, but it couldn't, like this. Why try it? Why not just trust what people are telling you?
Exactly. I mean, there's some people who take advantage of and they will kind of for attention, but this is a life, or this is a life you're playing around with. I wouldn't take that chance. But
people might believe if it's peanuts. And I don't know why airlines don't ban nuts as well. Like, I don't see why is that a problem for passengers not to eat nuts? That really annoys me. But then it's also, people have airborne allergies to milk. And milk is actually the most common dietary preference. So like 1 in 5 people avoid milk for whatever reason. And they will all probably have some sort of milk or lactose intolerance. Just be made ill if they eat milk because they're not used to it. It's the same with animal products, most animal products. But in children, it's like 5% of kids have a severe milk allergy. So milk's handed out in schools quite often and treated like this very healthy thing. And you're like, well, not healthy for everyone.
Not exactly. Exactly. It's not healthy for you if it's going to hurt you.
But, how big does a minority have to be before it's just normal that people have allergies? Like, just accept it. That's where the food industry needs to get to.
And that's what I wanted to ask you is, because food inclusivity, a lot of people, it's a broad term, I guess, for some people, or everybody has their own interpretation. Some people will just be, okay, well, we should have a vegan option in our menu, or, do we have a separate kitchen? Because I mean, I've worked in areas where, again, for religious reasons, with the no pork, there's some restaurants out there that actually have a separate kitchen where they cook, where they're absolutely sure that there is no pork cross-contamination. They're not using the same pans, the same frying, so what is, with your, because you're a food inspector and everything, what is the term food inclusivity? What does that entail?
It's just about including people, purposely have a policy of purposely including people who are normally excluded or find it difficult to eat out. And that can be eat out anywhere outside of the home. Like if you're not making food from scratch for yourself, that's eating out, because you have to trust someone else to understand this. And I think it should be taught as part of food safety, but it's not. It's sort of an additional extra. So if you have this disclaimer, you've said we can't serve people with allergies, that seems to be enough to be non-criminal. And I don't think that is enough to be non-criminal. And a lot of people disagree with me. Because they're like, oh, but it might contain, and you're like, but may contain is now used as a get out free card, right? And I know in the States they added sesame to the list of allergens. And so some producers started adding sesame because they couldn't deal with the labeling requirements. And in a bit of retaliation as well. Yeah,
because sesame is everywhere as well. And
but we're talking about a couple of percent of people are affected, and then there's a proportion of those people are severely affected. So the people who are severely affected need to, take extreme precaution. But then there's a whole market out there from a profitability side of it, especially for milk. There's all these people that are intolerant, or all these people that just want to know it doesn't contain it. They're not that concerned about contamination unless it's negligent. But what's negligent contamination? What's unintentional? Is it still negligent because it's foreseeable, even if it's unintentional? And a lot of the time, if there's a high, turnover of staff, or it's a very high turnover of food, like McDonald's or one of the big chains, they can't trust their staff to understand to enough of a degree. So there'll always be this human error risk, and then they're worried about liability. So, for example, a really good example is in the press. Domino's Pizza, I think this is like 2016, it's a long time ago now. They were asked, why don't you tell the allergic to peanuts community that all of their products are peanut free in the States? So don't do this in other countries. This is just America. And they answered, because we can't guarantee what our other customers do. We can't guarantee our staff haven't eaten peanuts in their break.
Yeah.
So we don't have a policy that we're free from, even though all of our ingredients do not contain peanuts. Yeah. And that was a very good answer. They're scared of liability.
Yeah, and it's I think in that case it's a responsible answer, because they're flat out saying we can't control what people do outside of this establishment. And I think that's where it gets difficult to kind of control.
That's where the liability should stop, though. If someone leaves their house with a peanut allergy, they have a level of risk. Yeah. And that's the level of risk they have when they walk into a Domino's. And that's, where does the end? Where does the public liability end? Yeah, exactly. And that is the compensation culture problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
and it's not like everyone's a certain amount of allergic. There's a variance in how severe people's allergy, or how sensitive they are. So someone might have an allergy, a legitimate diagnosed allergy, but they're going to risk it because they don't care that much. It's just uncomfortable. For me, I'm debilitated, but I'm not going to die. So I could take risks for certain pleasures. Like if I'm on holiday and I want to eat breakfast, I'll take more risk than maybe if I could skip breakfast, for a week. Right. I can't not eat for a week. But if I had severe allergies, I wouldn't risk it at all. I'd have to take, an extra bag with me with all my own food. Really take it to the extreme, especially on aeroplanes, because they probably were, again, if it's not peanut or some of the famous allergen, if it's milk, they're like, there'll be milk on the plane, we're going to give it out. we won't even guarantee we're not going to serve you milk. So I think there's a difference. And I have also heard of extremely good catering companies, like the elite of the world, and they've had cases where the person's had a reaction to food, and it turned out down the line, after they'd gone through litigation and basically settled with them to avoid any extreme fines in the UK especially, it turned out the person had another allergy that they hadn't had diagnosed. And that's like, I've had further allergens identified. So
Yeah.
I thought it was milk. It turns out it's probably milk intolerance. So that's why I can't really test for it. I can't have a concrete piece of paper that says yes.
Right.
But whenever I've accidentally had milk and I've traced it back, I'm very reactive to milk. But it's not an allergy. It's not the classic blood test allergy. But it's probably something to do with shellfish. And
Yeah.
this create, if I'm very allergic to insects, there could easily be an insect ground up in my food. Just the natural laws of nature that,
And the
there
food
are ground
coloring.
up. Yes, there's ground up insects. No, but there's ground up insects in our flour.
Yeah.
Because they can't get rid of them.
They can't. Yeah.
They can't filter out the, tiny piece of wing or something that's dropped off a plant, in the natural process. It's not negligence, it's just unlucky for me.
Yeah.
I can't control that. So I have to take medication to make sure that I don't react, especially if I'm away from home and take some precautionary medication. But I could just be in a restaurant where they got cockroaches. I wouldn't know. How would I know? Or they've put shellfish in my food. But colorings, that got me. That's probably what happened. The day I had that bad reaction, I probably had some non-vegan sweets that were labeled vegan, because I've spotted that again recently. And it was the colorings.
The colorings, especially the red and let's not get into the natural flavors, but that'll be a different episode because that's not vegan either. I saw actually your post on Castoreum, I think it's called, or we've had a whole thing on that, but it's not vanilla you're tasting. So
that shocked me though.
I've talked to people about this, and they still go for their strawberry or vanilla ice cream, and then they just don't care, even in gum. But that'll be a different topic. I want to ask you, as a food inspector, do you have any secrets that you could share with us that won't get you into too much trouble?
I started by saying that the law only protects what's criminal. They can't make you be kind or courteous.
Right.
And it's the same with, it varies in some countries. They do have this thing about, if there's a hair in food, it's criminal. But a lot of countries, basically, as long as they don't kill or injure anyone,
right,
that's legal. So you might be interested actually walking in the kitchen, especially if you have allergies. You walk in a kitchen and they just throw food around, the level of training that is adequate, that's quite often in general, worldwide standards, the level of training has to be adequate. So what is adequate? And actually, when you start getting to these big companies like Domino's, the big huge franchises that are all around the world, they do have to meet the local standards as well as their own standards. So if you do go in a franchise Burger King or McDonald's, the world's biggest franchises, they do have better standards than the legal criminal standard, so you actually, because they're enforcing their own franchise standards because they don't want any scandal or any damage to their reputation. But it's all motivated by litigation and how to avoid getting sued and complaints and refunds and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when it comes to...
It's not about protecting the people. It's about not getting sued. Yeah, this is not quite the same.
So that's where I go with my business and food inclusivity, is because it's more than is required by the law. But you're getting into customer service and communication and, being nice and kind and friendly and inviting and consumer experience. And I think that's really missing for the allergic community.
Yeah.
But even any community, really, where there's dietary preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Including kosher and halal and things. And I think there's a big misunderstanding. So if something's got a label, so when it comes into a restaurant, it's got a label on it that says it's whichever, it's claimed to be vegan, claiming to be kosher. Yeah, then they cook it and it's no longer those requirements. That is a huge misconception. Mm-hmm. There'll be places where it's not because it's just the normal culture. But like in the UK, your vegan option is probably cooked in on or next to animal products. Yeah. So you are eating animal products, and that's the thing vegans don't often know, and they're disgusted and they're horrified. And you're like, well, do you realize how much more you'd have to spend, and how many places you wouldn't be able to eat if you had this no contamination requirement for your food? You'd actually find it very difficult to eat.
Right. Yeah, you're right. In your opinion, what do you think? Why do you think that the the food industry is still not really being held accountable for, I mean, there's the whole as long as they're not killing anybody clause, but why do you think that's still tolerated or it's still acceptable?
The burden is on the
people?
person, especially with people with allergies, because that's probably the most strict requirement, right? Not dying is quite a strict requirement. Not dying is a strict requirement, but having your feelings hurt or being against your religion is a different set of issues. I think it's because they think it's the small minority when it's huge. I think they don't see these people, and the people themselves have learned to stay home and avoid awkward situations because the risk of meeting a jerk when you walk into a restaurant is quite high. Or meeting someone ignorant, and it's a lot of hassle and it's inconvenient for the people you're with. Yeah. So a lot of people would be loyal to certain companies or certain brands, and even a change in recipe could eliminate you from a whole chain because they've sharing the same machinery and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is they don't see this community. It's an invisible disability. It's not even treated as a disability.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
but it should be treated as a difference, like a characteristic difference that you can't be discriminated against, especially in schools and places of employment, places of study, like language centres and, really simple places where you should be treating everyone of every background and diversity equally. Yeah. And usually they're very good at that in other ways, but then they overlook the food. And food is at the centre of everything. Even if you get to a meeting and there's coffee and a cake, I can't have that usually. Yeah. Or I have to think ahead and take my own milk or my own snack.
And it's interesting because when you think that food is an essential need for any human, so we're talking on basic human rights, but we're denying that to some people. And I mean, it sounds dramatic. We're denying that, but for some people, it is a question of life or death. And yeah, it's interesting that people are still not taking this seriously, like a human rights. You should have the right to not be sick every time you eat somewhere. And schools,
it's a well represented. It's more than a few percent for each individual allergy. So when you add up all of people with allergies and intolerances for at least the legally listed, because you can be allergic to anything, but at least in the EU it's 14. It varies around the world which ones and how they're defined. But even for those, you should expect that there's at least a few people in 100 that would be seriously injured or die from a mistake with labeling and a mistake with ingredients. And that information, say I give you a list of ingredients, it doesn't have to be the secret recipe. It just has to be a list of ingredients. I don't know how to cook it at home myself, and I don't want to. But just giving me an accurate list of ingredients is actually quite difficult. And a lot of the time it's the suppliers or the manufacturers that won't guarantee that it doesn't contain something. But that information is useful for a lot of people. People who are trying to lose weight, people who are trying to follow a different diet for their health. And, there's diets for everything. There's diets if you've got ADHD. There's a diet if you've got diabetes that you can reverse diabetes. There's a diet for inflammation. MS as well. So people are loyal to their diets, like help them out. Give them the information.
Yeah, and that's another very good point, because there's some people, even with the medication that they're taking, it has nothing to do with food here. There's heart conditions, depression, anything.
Avoiding potassium, avoiding...
Exactly, the potassium. I mean, my mom can't have grapefruit because she's not being difficult. It's just, this is, if she wants her heart to keep working, she needs to stay away from that stuff. So we need to take that seriously. And for children, you were saying a lot of people just expect the people who have those intolerances or those restrictions to be responsible and take care of themselves. But if you have a 4 or 5-year-old at school, how, it's different when they're in high school or even in junior high, but there is a responsibility. Parents are sending their children to school, expecting them to be safe, so that it needs to be taken seriously. And
they have a duty of care, a lot like hospitals. But for example, in the UK, there's these Facebook groups, and it's just some vegans that are willing to take food to the hospital for the vegans because there's no food. There's no food for them. I went into hospital overnight. They thought I'd had a stroke. It was quite scary as well. Wow. But I was actually very calm until afterwards. I was like, that was actually quite scary. They gave me 2 bananas for dinner. And I'm like, cool, I like bananas, but this isn't really going to sustain me. Luckily, I'm only here till tomorrow morning. I got offered another banana. I was like, no, you're all right.
that's not a balanced meal. It's same with my mom who's vegan. She just had a massive heart attack and they were just giving her lettuce, so we make it a joke and say, okay, now you're a rabbit. But like there was nothing else they could give her. And she was even telling them I could have this and this, she was making a menu for them and they wouldn't do it. So
and I think the mass nature of food these days, fast food and convenience food, makes it harder to adjust things for people. So it's either take it or leave it. And we don't have to, and they don't have to do, there's no equal opportunity for people with different dietary preferences. And I'm sure in workplaces it causes, people won't get promotions because they're not that social because they have to go and eat dinner somewhere else, and they inconvenience their colleagues because they have to wipe down the keyboard or not bring nuts to work as well. And I think that's just a general thing that everyone should accept is just normal to not bring the thing someone could die from into the office.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's one thing we had in schools was if it was, the nuts was accepted, but if it was somebody with any of the lentils, things like that, or sesame, parents would actually complain, other parents, and we were just trying to say, well, listen, if this was your child, how would you feel about this? If your child is the one that could potentially die, wouldn't you want the other parents to kind of,
And if your child kills another child, how do you think that will make them feel for the rest of their life?
If your child witnesses the other child dying in front of them, how do you think that's, just keep the bread home?
There are cases where children have been bullying someone and they've thrown. I know a boy died from having cheese thrown at him, and someone else had a trick played on them and they ate it. I think it was nuts. They'd had a nut put in their food and they were just like kids do. They were just going to see what would happen.
Yeah.
And they died. Like, that's not what they were expecting, and that's not what adults expect. And it's because it's not talked about enough at school. It's a bit like sexual education. It's the same sort of education about people's dietary preferences, people's different beliefs about food, because even in a workplace, there's a lot of people that are not invited to things or miss out on things because it's out of their safety, and you should be always guaranteed safety at work.
Yeah.
But are you just going to be told to work from home if you disclose?
Yeah, exactly right.
And another thing to point out, though, is when people leave like the custody of the parents and go to university or away from home, that's when they're at extreme risk of dying from food allergies because they don't want to be the odd one out in their peer group or disclose if they go out to eat. They don't want to be the awkward one, or they don't know how to do it for themselves. Learn how to cook in a communal kitchen, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So that's like the death zone is like 16 to 25.
Yeah. And that's what people who don't live it don't understand. It goes beyond the food that you're ingesting. It's was that pan washed properly? Was there splatter somewhere? Did somebody touch a door handle and not wash their hands? There's so many. Yeah, it's
a lot like that. It's not a disability; it's the environment that disables them. Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios where that is very applicable, and in the workplace, you should guarantee someone's safety, and that would guarantee the thing that would disable them. To whatever extent, even if it's just like gluten intolerance, that might sound insignificant compared to a shellfish allergy, but it can be debilitating. It can put you in bed for a week. It can take all your energy and sabotage a holiday, and
the pain.
It's a big deal.
Excruciating pain. If anybody who's had a stomach flu or some kind of bad cramping can imagine going
more sick days, and there ends up being huge inequalities in earning power, and you can't go to the same vacations. You have to pay a higher premium to go somewhere that can cater to you, and all of these things are not realised. And I think even the government are trying to downplay the actual number. First of all, because they'd have to do something about it because it's increasing so quickly. But the data's old. Like, it is a hard thing to survey. Like, how do you get... But if you ask people themselves, 20% of people say they have a sensitivity to food. So if it's 20% of people, that's pretty much everyone, right? That's like a good enough chunk of society. But if they keep it in the UK, they say 2 million people. So that's like 1 in 30 people have a severe life-threatening food allergy. Is that still not enough people? When is it enough people?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. But you have a lot of resources on this because I'm always, you work with lawyers, you've worked with all sorts of stuff. So can you share a little bit of where
I do
we
like
can
talking
find
about
it?
this subject.
Yeah, no, and I mean, you have your book. We haven't even talked about this, but it's Inclusivity is the new.
Yeah, Inclusive is a new exclusive. Yeah,
is the new
and actually, I
exclusive.
interviewed a lot of experts, and that was another aha moment, like a cliffhanger in my career. That's where I decided to do this full time instead of working with the hotels anymore.
Right.
And it's because it's so significant. Even marketers are like, yeah, it's profitable because you'll get the person with the allergy or the whichever diet preference, and you'll get their family or the group they're with, and you'll get them to promote you and be like, anyone else with my particular flavor of dietary preference, you can go here, and advertise you and put you in the media. So there's some restaurants that have completely banned walnuts for an evening, and then they've taken it off the menu completely just because they know there's a little boy in their neighborhood that wants to eat there. So he can always eat there because there's no walnuts on the premises.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and isn't that a good story? And like a fish and chip shop that on a Monday, the fish and chip shop are gluten-free. Then all the people in that area like Monday's fish and chips night. That's a very British thing, I know. But like afternoon tea in the UK, especially because it's a coronation today.
Right.
Prince Charles, yeah. So people will be having scones and jam, right? This is a very British thing. And on like high tea. And it's a very queen-like thing to do, you know, like this is how we'd imagine his mother was eating, right? But it's so easy to make a scone or a scone, depending where you're from in the country, without butter. Like it's just, and it even looks and tastes the same. Obviously, there's differences in the alternatives you use. But you're like, can you not just offer that? It's the same as like, can you not just offer a gluten-free one? Yeah. It can even be something you have in the freezer, just for that person to be included in this celebration.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that simple, and it does make a difference. And like you say, it's a market that if somebody knows that people are going out of their way for them to be able to eat, that the word mouth is gonna be so much more effective than any advertising you would put out. But yeah, it's.
I take so many pictures of food; it's unbelievable. Like, look at this amazing vegan option, and usually, if it's a vegan option that's also milk-free, I'm like, wow. And it's like, if it's something that's not expected, like it's not just fake meat. Because I always get asked this question. I've even got very insulted sometimes because I'm like, I know what you're going to ask me is why do vegans eat fake meat and why do they want it to be fake? You're like, if there was an alternative, I would take it. It's not my favorite thing to eat, the thing I'm not used to eating. And even when I was a meat eater, I only really ate chicken. So it's only the protein I'm trying to replace. It's not, I don't need anything bleeding. Thank you. I never appreciated it bleeding in the first place.
That's right. You don't appreciate the taste, but people that are making this food just automatically assumes that you'd want a bacon flavored something, you know, you're thinking.
And it's like even people who can't swallow, you know, or people who have lost a few teeth. Like they might need something softer than usual, or, you know, they might need the vegetables cooked a bit longer. If you make that exception, I know it takes more effort and it's a disruption of service and it takes everything on the table for everyone might take longer, but you can ask them if that's acceptable, if they want, you know, there's things you can do to make it very nice for everyone. And because you made that exception, you're then remarkable compared to your competition.
Exactly. That's what makes you stand out from everyone.
But if I'm a general so say I'm a food safety auditor, which is like the private sector for, you know, hotel chains or franchises, I'm not hired to talk about vegan and allergies. I'm hired to do this checklist. It's a bit more complicated than that because you have to assess things based compared to a set of standards, but it's not mentioned. So if I tell someone who's taking orders, let's just say a McDonald's type scenario. I haven't worked at McDonald's, so I can say that. And they're probably the best in the world for their training, actually, but which you wouldn't expect, but it's true. Because they have such a huge reliance on like high level training. But say they weren't trained to know the difference between milk-free and vegan. I'll just casually ask them, like, if I had a milk allergy, which I do, could I have the vegan option? And if they say I'm like, that's so dangerous. And it happens so often. Yeah. It's the norm. They make that mistake. Right. So that's why I have to like harp on about it so much. in my book and on my. I have a blog as well. I have free resources on my website as well. So if you need to know this because it's a shock to the, if you need to process this a bit more, it's explained fully in the free resources and the concept of food inclusivity and the different terms about free from allergens and then non-dairy and those sort of things that people confuse easily.
Yeah, we can add that at the end of the episode. We could just redirect people to your resources so they can do their.
Oh, my website's just my name, so it's just heatherlandex.com, and everything should
pop up.
Tech's not my forte, but it should all be there. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot, and I put a lot of things there, especially as they happen. That's where I like to report it because there's a lot of food safety officers there, and obviously I'm a new flavour of food safety officer.
And I like how you post. You'll even post the product. You'll be like, "Look what I found! This is amazing!" And then so people can actually look for that label and say, "Okay, I can. It's safe for me to go there."
There's a whole sustainability angle as well. So if they have vegan options or plant-based options, they usually have a very good sustainability approach to it and how much carbon they've saved by switching out the meat for, I don't know, some fake meat or avocados. And then people have a debate about avocados, and it's always like, what do you want to debate? Do you want to debate who's producing the most carbon, who's using the most water?
Yeah. There's that whole other side of it. Yeah. How is your work received in the food industry? I can imagine that, when you're starting to hold a mirror in front of all these people, some of them may actually be interested and say, wow, thank you. I didn't know where to get this information. And some people may, because they can be rude and mean and nasty. How is it received when you approach people with
it does polarize people. I do like to explain until they're persuaded. So I am working on the whole industry all at once. But usually you met with because I have a food, ex-food police background. I'm vegan. I have allergies. I'm usually met with disdain. I'm not their favorite person. I'm their most difficult customer. I'm the person that comes in and costs them time and confine them, and usually has a bit of an authoritarian role. But once they meet me, I'm quite friendly. It's better to have me on your side. Yes. So you can ask me questions rather than going to the authority, and rather than having a complainer. Because if you've already injured someone, they're not going to talk to you in the same way that I might, preventatively. So it's a bit like the holistic healthcare system, and the prevention rather than the cure. If you've already injured someone, it's too late. But there's so much you can do with communication that's nothing to do with compliance. So much in communication and customer service that you can save yourself time and yourself more money, and all these very logical business issues. So once I break down that initial shock of, oh God, she's one of theirs, then they usually see there's two ways of doing it. They either have no idea what I'm talking about, and then it's like coat from basic food safety up to what's food inclusivity and allergy management, or they're the other way and they're so scared of liability they don't do anything different to the status quo. So there's a lot of places that they have like legal advisors that just copy paste these. It's a bit like having a cookie policy on a website. You can have one that's relevant, or you can have one that's just cut and pasted from a legal website.
That's right.
But what I'm saying is to provide more than that.
Yeah. And once they get to know you, because I know you, we get to sound like this. You said, oh no, she's one of those, but no, you're more than that.
I need to do more like this. Yeah, thanks for that. Because I do need to do more of these like nice chats with people, and it is logical. It's profitable. Yeah. And it's very kind, and a lot of people have the right intentions already. Yeah.
When people are open to that conversation, they get to see how important it is. They see a different side of it that they wouldn't have seen before. And that's why I appreciate the work that you do, because you're not doing it just to be like, I have rights or nothing. I mean, you do, but it's more than that. It's educating people on a topic that nobody has information about or realize how important it is. there is a question I need to ask you. I try to stay on track when I do these interviews, is to keep it on the topic. But you said something earlier, and my mind is just like, I need to know more. So this is my own personal question. It has nothing to do with our listeners. I'm sure some of them will. You mentioned you were a possum tracker earlier.
Yeah.
And the stingray tag and all of that, but possum tracker, can you please tell me a little bit more about that? And how does that look like?
Literally, I used to track possums with so they'd have a little collar.
Mm-hmm.
They have a little radio collar, and I'd go track them at night in the middle of I'd be in the woods in Australia. And there's two types of possums, and we were trying to track if like one's the bad guy and one's the native, like.
Okay.
There's the big possums, and then there's the soft, like a lot of the Australian marsupials are a bit vulnerable to invasive species. And occasionally we'd find a snake instead of a possum. We only found a radio collar. Yeah. And then so sometimes we just track them to see where they are and see how many there are and that kind of thing and their behaviors. Other times we'd trap them and do a health check, because I was working with a veterinarian, so I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes you're weighing them and that kind of thing. That's quite nice. But I also did lizards and small mammals, like the equivalent of a mouse, but more marsupials. I won't give you the Australian names because they sound really weird. I like handling animals.
Yeah.
Even wild animals. It doesn't bother me. Like they're going to try and kill you, but it doesn't bother me. But I can't. I'm really like sentimental. I can't. What's the word? I'm too empathetic for the animal. Yeah. I can't chip them, and I had to put microchips in, and with things like lizards, you actually amputate a toe and things like that to tag them, so that you've already collected them, so you know that which one it is. It's like a numbering system. It's so gross. I couldn't take it. I just felt too guilty. Yeah. And with stingrays, you'd actually use a harpoon, and it attaches a tracker on them. And it's because not much is known about their effects of, because the shark species in Australia are getting killed off, really, from fishing, but also because people don't like sharks because they eat humans. Right. It's only actually a couple of people a year. Right. And it's not the sharks you'd think of, like great whites or anything, so there's all. Yeah. It is a predator species, but humans kill more humans than sharks. And we don't go around killing them.
We're not exactly just because we see them down on the street.
So I was like sometimes I was attached to the back of a boat looking for stingrays, and then we'd harpoon them they have like a little tag on the outside, and some of them you catch them with a big net, and then I didn't like doing this either because they usually tag them in some way, and sometimes they put them inside, like they put a thing inside them because they have quite a big body cavity. But if you turn a stingray upside down, it goes to sleep. It's like anesthetize.
That is so cool.
Did you know that? Yeah, it's quite cool to watch, but it's also pretty gruesome in parts. Because you always have an influence on how much they're vulnerable if you've tagged them in some way or scared them.
Right. And that's the hard part for me too. Like I'm the same as you. I've done some work with controlling fish population, and we'd have to catch fish, and then we'd have to clip part of their fins, so we knew that they had been caught, so we weren't counting the same fish over and over. And just to clip a little part off the fin, the dorsal fin, it hurt me. So I can't imagine harpooning a stingray, or it's a different kind of work. I wouldn't be able to do it.
But the environment, like coral reefs, and it was all a protected area, so it was just me on this little boat with another diver, and that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Just to see the wildlife. Yeah, that's quite the experience. I love it.
And the aim of the project was to see if it was a good thing that there were more stingrays or a bad thing that there were more stingrays. Okay. But they didn't tell me the full extent. They do end up culling some of them, and I didn't want to know that. If I'd have known that, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I had to be able to rescue the other person in a remote boat and drive a boat and learn all these skills for oxygen, and all of that learning is quite cool.
Yeah, that's quite the life. I love it. I love it. You've studied food at every angle.
But I'm allergic to insects. It's no surprise after
You're right.
I've been bitten by so many things.
And you were in Australia and you're allergic to insects.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got bitten by a redback. Have you heard of a redback? It's not the most poisonous spider, but
No, but I've heard
it
of
gave
them.
me
Yeah.
a really, really sore leg.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And you've been stranded in Iceland. That's just like you've had both extremes.
Yeah. Thank you, pandemic. Yes, that was stressful in another way because I didn't know
Oh
how
my
I could
goodness.
get home. And my children were quite young, a few years ago. They're only
Yeah.
starting school now, so they're quite
Oh,
young.
wow. That's incredible. I like to ask this question to my guests when they come on is there any advice that you wish you would have had sooner in your life just to make your life a little easier? Is there any wisdom or
I
advice
think I would have liked the confidence to advocate for myself. I think I always just so for example, if I was at school with allergies, there's so much I could have done for myself that would have helped myself not suffer so much. And I think I needed to rebel younger against the status quo. Go and study the thing you want to study. Don't go study the thing that'll get you the job because you'll lose interest after 10 years anyway.
Yeah, that is so true. That is
Yeah,
so
and
true.
trial and errors worked for me. Like I started out in biology, came back round to environmental health in people, and now I'm doing something very specific and something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to go, not like do the job for 40 years, retire, and then you die. Like, I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that. Don't do
No,
that.
I believe that too. We evolve as a person. So what we are interested in would also evolve. And I think you mentioned a lot of people are stressed, and it causes effects on their health. But I think that has a lot to do with it as well. We're just so programmed to say, we stick to it. It's a good job. You have benefits, you have this and that, but I'm miserable, and
And I think,
you break
especially in
down.
relation to the pandemic, even just being sedentary and sitting in an office, sitting on Zoom like we are now for too many hours a day is like as bad as smoking. That's going to be the next thing that we need to work on. We're going to have to all work on treadmills, and
That's right.
that'll be the next thing. And
They
actually,
already,
it's probably the first generation ever that, because of technology and things like that, that the youngest generation probably knows more than the elders now. That's quite mind-boggling.
Yeah, and then even for mental health, and they're definitely more. I've noticed that with I don't like to call them the younger generation, but the ones who take over from us, is they're definitely more in tune with how they're feeling, and they're able to speak up. We just have to tough it out. But the standing desks are already a thing. The sitting on a rolling ball. We were already starting all of that, so it'll be interesting 10 years from now to see what will happen. How do you find balance in your life? You're everywhere. Like you were.
I don't
everywhere
think I do. I think that's the problem. It is. There's not much of a barrier between my professional and personal life, and I'm working on it. And I'm trying to do more things that using technology and marketing and all these. I'm on a huge learning curve with how to reach more people and do less hours in that effort.
Yeah.
I'll probably always talk a lot, though. That's probably going to be a consistent thing.
That's okay.
I should do more podcasts. Do more podcasts.
You do. You should definitely. Yes, it helps with that. And I like that, the fact that because a lot of people will say that they'll talk about everything that they do, but sometimes you're just like, I need to readjust. I'm at that same point right now where work and home life is kind of jumbled up again. So I need to but yeah, you need to take inventory once in a while and make sure you're still on track.
Yeah, and I think you sometimes prioritize the adventure and the fun and the unknown.
Yeah.
Because there's loads more uncertainty than there was 3 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to learn how to model it for my kids because I don't know. Yeah. My parents didn't model it for me because they had, standard job 9 to 5 in the UK.
That's it for 30, 35 years, and that's what they expected us to do. Yeah. Yeah. They still don't understand. I know I have those conversations with my parents. They still don't understand the way we have to do things now. And then it's like,
you can learn in so many different ways now. You don't have to rely on school. If school doesn't suit you, you can still learn and be good at something.
And you could probably learn in a more beneficial way. That's the way I feel. And I feel bad. I'm in the education sector, but I will be the first one to say, and I always told my children, do what feels right for you, because I understand what that's like to stress yourself out, go through anxiety and all of that, and still not use your degree. I'm the same. I have a bachelor's in physics, and I am nowhere near that right now. I still love science, but
I've seen some of your videos teaching children about science, though.
Oh yeah. That will always
You've still
be
got a
my
skill.
thing. That will be the best decision I've ever made, was to teach children about physics and sciences. That's awesome. But I'm not making, I'm not going up in space like I thought I was, but it's okay.
I think which teachers you get as growing up there is really important.
It's what makes the difference. And that's what happened to me, because I hated science. I hated math. And I had amazing teachers in high school that changed that for me. And math and science is my thing. Like, I breathe it, I live it, I eat it. But I wouldn't. I don't know what would have happened if I went all the way up to a PhD in that. I would have gone insane, I think. But you can keep changing.
I'd say I like science, and I'm really nerdy. I'm just not academic. I don't like the hierarchy thing as well, and some of it's not practical, some of it's only theory.
It is, yeah, and it's also the way that it's taught is outdated. So that's what I try to work on, is changing it up to make it the fun that it actually is. It can be fun. I never thought I'd say the science is fun. Physics is fun.
Food safety is fun.
Food safety is fun. That's right. Yeah. Harpooning stingrays is fun. That's hilarious. I also asked this question, and I can't wait to hear your answer, just because I know you enough to know that it's going to be a great answer. This is something that a little girl asked me when she was interviewing adults for a school project, and nobody was answering her, and she got all excited when I answered her. So the question is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, I love that question. Well, actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a TV presenter. Ooh. So I'm probably going towards that, being a presenter of some kind and a speaker.
That's nice.
I don't want to grow up is probably the most accurate answer.
Yeah, that's a thing.
And you don't have to, which is quite a revelation.
That's right. I think that's when you've made it as an adult, is when you realize you don't actually, this is my personal opinion, you actually realize you don't have to grow up. You can stay, you can nurture that inner child in you forever.
Yeah, and go towards the things that light you up, and it feels like play.
Yes.
If you can earn a living doing that, then you're going to do really well.
You're doing great. Yeah. Now, what are you working on now? What's new for you?
I'm just thinking that's a really good question.
It is. It really is a good, because we ask children this all the time. But what are you up to now?
I'm working with a few accountability. They're actually business coaches, so it's actually good for me that I've got this accountability buddies. I'm actually working on trying to produce more content and ways for people to learn this, that I don't have to work the hours, like I don't have to do one-to-ones, or I can do courses or teach people in a different alternative way I don't want to do reading, So the book's great, but then I want to have it in all the other formats where people can learn it better. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I don't know how to do tech in an easy way. So I'm in this learning process, but it will be like blogs and podcasts and ways to educate people really in a fun way.
Yeah, I think it's important, and a lot of people will be open to it as well, just if it's accessible.
I'm also working on it being more fun, like you say, and be more fun and more genuine and more probably graphic in my sense of humor comes out, and bolder, like you say, like it is about advocating for yourself and being, entitled. I've been called entitled in a negative way, and I'm like, but I am entitled.
Yeah, because it's for your health. So you should be entitled. And we talked about this before we recorded as well, that we need to be talking about the topics that people tiptoe around, or that they don't want to talk because it makes them feel uncomfortable. And we need to be bold and graphic. I'm the same. I will paint you pictures you cannot unsee. But it's necessary sometimes to get for people to understand how serious this is, and
share stories, because it provides comfort for other people that other people are going through the same, and they're not some freak with allergies. They're not some exception to the rule. They are actually entitled, and it is possible to be included in an easy way.
And it's not just them. There are other people that are going through the exact same thing, because when we don't talk about it, you really think there's something wrong with you. Like, why am I,
Yeah, it's a very invisible community, an invisible disability, or an invisible, right that's getting violated.
Yes. I love how you said that. Yeah, absolutely. It is a right that's being violated, and people who are not going through it should really remember that it's a right.
And I think talking about things that are quite hard and traumatic, but with massive amounts of humor, does help people in some way.
That's right. It makes it more human. It makes it more relatable as well. So I really appreciate it.
And it's also, if you're going to suffer, you might as well get something out of it. Yeah. If you've got a good anecdote afterwards or a good story afterwards.
That's right.
Stories are also entertaining, even if it's sad at the end of the day.
It's the best way to learn too, I find, is through storytelling and through sharing experiences. I think you learn more. And
graphic examples.
Yes, I like that. I love it. I could talk to you all day about this, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences and shedding light a little bit on the importance. And I invite everybody, I will put Heather's information on the description of this podcast so that they can follow you and subscribe and get those resources if they want to read up on it. And start talking about it, start demanding your rights as a person who is not being difficult. And yes, you are entitled to your safety. So thank you again. So you mentioned heatherlandex.com. Is there other, on LinkedIn as well, is there other venues that they can follow you? Your book, where can they get your book?
My book is on Amazon. So if you have the title, Inclusive, the New Exclusive, my name is like the only one on the internet, so that helps.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I think I'm inconsistent with social media, but you can find me on all of them. Okay. Even TikTok, I gave a go for a while there.
Nice.
I might do a bit more of that. It's quite fun.
It is fun. It is a lot of fun. Yeah. So I'll put that information in the description so people can get a hold of you and see the work that you do. And again, thank you again so much. And I really look forward to seeing what else you got out there and hearing more of your stories. Yes.
Wonderful speaking to you.
It was wonderful, yes. And for everybody who is listening or watching, don't forget again to like, follow, and subscribe. And don't forget to follow Heather as well on the amazing work that she does. And until then, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll talk soon.